Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how you can develop a random quote generator using Django, ZenQuotes API, and Tailwind CSS. So let's have a look at some of the things that we'll be going through. The first one, I'll show you how you can set up your Django project for deployment. We'll also see how you can manage your static assets such as images, CSS files, and JavaScript. I'll also cover APIs, and then finally, I'll walk you through how you can deploy your app via Heroku and Gunicorn. So let's define what an API is, or application programming interface. Is a way for different software programs to talk to each other and share information. Simple illustration, a client, in this case our Django application, will make a request to the ZenQuotes API, which will process that request and send back a response. In this case, the quotes that will come from the ZenQuotes API. So with that said, let's have a walkthrough of the complete application. If you have a background image, then you have a card section with the image and the quote. So luckily I've exhausted my limit over here for the quote for today, but once we deploy it via Heroku, we'll be able to get the quotes rendering correctly. So if you refresh your image, you'll be able to get a new quote and also a new image. So the image API is working. Then the images are also being saved into the database. So if you go to the admin interface and click on quotes, you'll be able to see a list of the quotes and also the images that have been generated. So we'll be using the ZenQuotes API. It's the simplest API that I found outside here. And then at the bottom I have my terminal, how the virtual environment activated. On the left hand side we have the project, it's called the Quotes app. We also have the home application that I created. If you look at the models, I defined a models, that is the quote text, author name, URL, image URL, and the date created. Then we also have our static files folder where I have the background image. Then we also have the templates file with the random quotes, which has the HTML for our homepage. Style, we have the random quotes, which is the HTML file with some Tailwind styles over here. So before we start, I also want us to look at some of the required files for the application. Since we'll be deploying it via Heroku, we need some 3 files here that are really important. The first one is the proc file. The proc file is what tells Heroku how to run your application. Then we also have the requirements.txt, which has all our dependencies. Then we have the runtime, which just specifies the Python version that you are using for the application. It's really important to have all these 3 files when you want to deploy your application in Heroku. So let's explore the quotes settings file. So at the very top, you need to configure the allowed host section. You need to pass in we have our allowed hosts over here at the top. Then I've also added our home application inside the installed apps. Scrolling down, I've added a path to our templates. Then here is also important. For now we are using the default SQLite configuration, but later after setting up Heroku, we'll see how you can set up the Postgres database here. So I'll comment it out for now. Then over here at the bottom we have our static file configurations. So with that said, let's go ahead and start working on our views file inside the home application. So the views is what will handle all the logic. This is where we'll make all the requests, and then we'll be able to pass the data to the template. So I'll create our function over here that is going to be called random quotes. So function based view, so random quotes, then return render text request. Then the name of the HTML is random quotes.html. Then we'll be passing the context over here. Right, so once that's done, we need to plan how we are going to work inside the view. So the first thing that I'll do is that we need to fetch our API endpoints. So just say that the first step is to get our endpoints. Okay, so that is going to be quote API URL. Then the next one is going to be the Picsum API URL. We need to modify the height, the width. and the height. Then now let's make a request to this one, so I'm going to call it quote API URL. So I'm going to call it quote response, which will be request to the API URL. Then the next one is the Picsum response. This is going to be request.get Picsum API URL. So now let's set some default values for the author, the image, and the quote. So again, comment just a second, set default values. So author, quote is going to be, the default value should be no quote available for the author. It's going to be the same thing. Then for the image URL, we're just going to set it to none. Right, so now the next thing is that you want to check the status code, which means that if the request was successful, so if request.response, if quote.response, if quote response to status code is equal to 200 and Picsum response to status code is equal to 200, we are fetching the quote data, then we're calling the JSON method. Then here we're just retrieving the author. So the right way to retrieve the author from the response is to just say author, then quote data. Then we want to now, before we can actually get the author and the quote, let's verify the data type. So if this distance, then we pass the quote data. We want to check if it's a list, and the length is greater than 0. Then we're just going to grab the quote, then the first one, the list, then we need to get the quote, that is Q, based on the documentation of ZenQuotes API. If there's no quote, let's say something, no quote available, and then the author, we're going to do the same thing. The first item, the list, then get author. If there's no author, it's going to be unknown. Now we also need to fetch the image URL is equal to image URL. Image response .url. Should we pick some response? Let's get rid of that. Now once you have this, you can go ahead and save the records into the database. So that is going to be, we need to import the model at the top. So from models, import quotes, actually quotes. Then I'm going to say quotes .objects.create, where quote text, remember the field over here was quote text, then author name, and then image URL. So that will work for us. Let's paste this on. So let's pass them into our context. So quote, author, then the image URL. Then once we have this, we need to render them into our templates. So let's head over to the templates here, random quotes. So we have quote, author, and image URL. So that's okay. Let's run the server and see if it went fine. So refresh our browser. So it's actually working. When we refresh the browser over here, Then if you refresh again, we actually get another quote and also a fresh image from the Picsum API. Let's check onto our database and see if it's being saved. So let's refresh here. Yeah, so the quotes are being saved into the database, so everything went fine. Now the next thing that you're going to do is to set up Heroku so that you can create a database and configure our settings.py database configurations. So for now we are using the default SQLite database configuration, but when you want to deploy an application, it's not recommended that you use. So there are two ways. So now you can create a new Heroku application. You can either come to here and say create a new app, or you can create it using your terminal. So I'll head over to my terminal, then I'll stop the server. Then I'll say Heroku login. Once that is done, we can now create a new Heroku app via the command line. Heroku create my daily quotes. Then let's try out that. Yeah, so that work, my daily quotes is available. So if you go back to Heroku and refresh our dashboard, you'll be able to see the newly created app. So let's open it. You can also say open app to check the site. So welcome to your new app. For now it's blank, we don't have anything going on here, but once we deploy it, we'll be able to see the live app over here. So what we need to do now is to configure our database. So we'll create a new Postgres database in Heroku by going to resources. Then under add-ons, you can search for a Postgres. So Heroku Postgres, click on that. Then submit order form. So it goes for $5 per month, or you can choose the hourly rate, that is $0.007 per hour. So I'll go with the hourly rate, then I'll destroy it later after finishing the project. So submit order form. Yeah, so once that is done, we can click on the Heroku Postgres. Then under settings, you'll be able to see the database credentials. So let's click on view credentials, and all we need is the host, database name, user, and the password. So let's start by copying the host. Then we'll paste it inside our settings. Then database configuration is here. So for now, I'll comment out the SQLite configuration, but I'll remove it completely. Then I'll comment this one. So then host, you can add it there. The database name will be for the name of our database. Remember to enclose them in quotes. Then the user. And then the password is this long string. So this is not actually the right way to set up everything. When you're working on a live application, I recommend that you hide all these keys. Don't just export them like this. This is just for testing purposes. So when you are deploying your application, I highly recommend that you hide them and don't push them to GitHub. So this is just for practice. I don't recommend you to do this. So it's just to show you how you can do them. So yeah, that is it. That is it for the database configuration. Since it's a new database, we need to do our migrations again and create a new super user. So I'll go ahead and clear out the terminal, then do some migrations. So Python manager file, make migrations, then home, then migrate. Okay, so the migrations are going on. So as the migrations continue, let's go back to Heroku, and then we'll copy this domain name over here, then come back to our settings. Under allowed hosts, we will add it just after the local host. Then remember to get rid of this HTTP protocol, just like that. So let's check our migrations, and we are almost there. So you need to ensure that it's working fine locally. Let's refresh again. And yes, you have our quotes coming through. If you are going to go to the next quote, still working. And if you were to check our admin section, we need to log in with the musical user. So let's head over to quotes. Yeah, so you can see our quotes over here have been saved, so that's okay. But one more problem, the author name is unknown. So let's check our views file to check our logic. So if we go to home, the name of the app, so views, this is where all the logic goes. So the quote over here, the key should be A, not Q. So that is what the ZenQuotes API mentions. Then let's refresh once more, just confirm if it's working. Yeah, so the author name is coming through. I can see Thomas Jefferson. And yeah, that's okay. So one more thing before we can push the code is that we need to collect our static files. So static files are things like images. Remember, we have a background image over here for our homepage. So we need to run the collect static command. After that, all the files in the static files will be copied inside our static root. So let's go ahead and do that. So Python manage.py. Then you can see the message, you want to get static files copied to the static folder. So once that is done, I think you're good to go. Need to close all this and push the code to GitHub. So github clear the terminal, then git push. That's the master branch. Alright, so once we pushed our code to master branch, we need to connect it with the Heroku using this command. So we need to add remote to our local repo using the command Heroku git remote /a. Then the name of the app, and remember the name of our app is My Daily Quotes. Then just press enter. Then we are good to go now. So let's push our code to Heroku. So git push Heroku master. Press enter. So let's give it some seconds to deploy the site. Like I told you, it's really easy to deploy using Heroku as compared to the other platforms. So this is writing objects at 94%. So right now it's installing the dependencies. We have our working application deployed in Heroku, so we can refresh again. We have our images coming through. Have the next quote, you can click to see the next quote, and yes, everything seems fine. That is beautiful. So yeah, so guys, that is how you create an application. That is how we work with APIs, and that is how we deploy using Heroku and Gunicorn. So Gunicorn is what keeps your application running in production. So in this case, we've deployed via Heroku. So that will bring us to the end of the video. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please feel free to put them into the comment section. I'll do my best to answer them, and see you in the next video.